Many historians, including myself, date the formation of the Tokugawa shogunate from the year 1600, date the start of the, rather not the Tokugawa shogunate, but the start of the Tokugawa period of Japanese history, also nicknamed or known as the Edo period, because the capital was in Edo, dated from the year 1600. But really, the situation is a little more complex. While the Tokugawa did have unquestioned control, were unquestionably the main power in Japan from the year 1600, from their victory at Sekigahara, their government actually took over a decade to fully coalesce. In fact, some people would argue that it didn't take its real final form until something like the 1630s. But it's very important to remember that although the Tokugawa had won, the Toyotomi were not gone. They were not gone. Hideyori was still alive. Tokugawa, even as he was clearly acting against the interests of Hideyori, and as he made all of the great lords of Japan swear loyalty to him instead of to the Toyotomi after his victory at Sekigahara, Tokugawa, did not kill Hideyori, and he did not completely eliminate the Toyotomi clan. And Hideyori lived in Osaka, in this great castle that his father had built with his immediate family, and with increasingly surrounded by samurai who were kind of frozen out of the Tokugawa, of the emerging Tokugawa state. People who had maybe opposed Tokugawa at Sekigahara. Some of those people, Ronin, masterless samurai, who had lost their masters either through fighting or because the Tokugawa had found reason to dislike their former masters and kill them or force them to commit suicide. Basically, all the disaffected warriors of Japan began to go to Osaka, where Hideyori was biding his time, where he was growing up. He was a very small child when his father died, but by the time the final confrontation with Ieyasu came in 1614 and 1615, Hideyori was a young man, and he was very eager to assert himself. And he was all the more eager to assert himself because Tokugawa had been consolidating power in his own name in the meantime. In 1600, as we've seen, he defeats his enemies. He rewards his friends with gifts of enemies' land, kills some of his former enemies, exiles some, displaces them in the same way that Hideyoshi used to do, move them from place to place. And by 1603, Ieyasu has himself appointed Seitai Shogun. He is shogun from 1603, despite the fact that Hideyori still maintains ties to the imperial court through that office of regent that his father had occupied. So Ieyasu becomes shogun in 1603, but 2 years later he resigns in favor of his son Hidetada, while continuing to rule behind the scenes. So by 1605, Hidetada is the second shogun, but until Ieyasu's death in 1616, it was still very much clear that the retired shogun was exercising power basically in the same way that retired emperors and retired regents and retired shoguns had done on countless occasions before him. This, however, was seen not necessarily as a slight against his son Hidetada. Hidetada was, at the time that he became shogun, was already an adult, was already somebody who had proven himself. He was a confident commander. Ieyasu did not sideline his son, did not use him as a complete puppet. He gave his son very important ceremonial and administrative functions. And it was clear that instead of controlling his son, what Ieyasu was doing was he was grooming him to eventually take power in his own right after Ieyasu, finally died. And so when Ieyasu did die in 1616, nobody looked at the second shogun as a weak boy. He was already a very mature man who had the experience of government, who had the experience of military command behind him, and who had already become the second shogun, and that fact alone lended the Tokugawa dynasty a degree of legitimacy that many previous warrior governments had not had. Certainly, that Hideyoshi's government did not manage to make happen. In fact, we've seen how the problematic succession of a minor actually served to dismantle the Toyotomi Empire. Ieyasu moves the center of his government to Edo. As we've seen, a very small fishing village initially, which then ballooned into an absolutely great city. For a while, Edo was, I believe, the most populous city in the world. In the early 18th century, especially when Edo was kind of at the height of its economic and cultural sophistication compared to the other cities of the world, it was a city with a population well over 1 million people, which was astonishing at that time. Had become a great center of commerce, had become a great center of consumption, great consumption and production of culture, but also a center of industry, center of shipping, and the center of political power, for reasons which we shall discuss later. But suffice it to say that Ieyasu's base of power is in Kyoto, is in the east. At the same time, Hideyori is still in Osaka. The last Toyotomi heir is still in Osaka. He doesn't really control a great amount of territory beyond the city, but just like the southern court during the Nanbokucho period, he has all sorts of disaffected samurai consistently trickling in, and before long he's managed to build up a great army and to attract some famous warriors to his cause. And by 1614, Ieyasu knows that something has to give. He can no longer tolerate an increasingly assertive, increasingly adult, well-armed basically a rival claimant for political power over there in Osaka in the west. So Ieyasu picks a fight. He actually claims that Hideyori is trying to put a hex on him. Literally, it's a very convoluted incident, but basically by dedicating a temple by dedicating a bell at a temple and splitting up some characters in the inscription that otherwise would have spelled Ieyasu's name. Ieyasu claims that Hideyori is trying to put a hex on him and mobilizes a great army, and in the winter campaign of 1614 assaults Osaka Castle, and he's not successful. He actually does not take the castle. But Ieyasu is also somebody who is able to use guile and deceit to his advantage. He makes contacts with Hideyori, who had fought off this gigantic army, which was assaulting Osaka, and tells Hideyori, okay, look, let's be friends again, everything is going to be okay, and we are going to withdraw our army, but as a sign of good faith, and we'll figure out some way to share power amicably, but as a sign of good faith, what I need you to do to prove to me that you're serious about this, is I need you to fill in the moat of Osaka Castle. That important ditch, very, very wide ditch that was filled with water, that was an essential part of a castle's defenses, Ieyasu said, as long as you fill that in and show me that you are serious about being friends with me, I will remove my army, and I will show you that I am serious about being friends with you. Hideyori is warned against this, but he accepts Ieyasu's terms. He fills in the moat, and Ieyasu, of course, does not withdraw. He instead renews his assault, and during the summer campaign of 1615, he finally takes Osaka Castle. Once again, Hideyori's forces do very well initially. They actually launch a counterattack that almost punches through to Ieyasu's camp, and if you would have killed Ieyasu, then they would have essentially won. But they are instead defeated, and the castle is taken, and nobody really knows what happened to Hideyori, but there is certainly, the castle burned, the room where he was in burned, there are some legends that he survived, but he is certainly out of the picture, and Ieyasu, in 1615, 12 years after setting up his shogunate, is finally in a position where he is in absolute control of Japan. He had been in more or less single control, except for Osaka and some people who really didn't like him, who fled to Osaka. He had been in control more or less since 1600, but finally in 1615, the last kind of bit of unfinished business from the Warring States period has been taken care of, and Ieyasu is free to put together a truly innovative warrior government. We are going to talk about the shape of this government next week, and frankly, I can't wait. I love the Edo period. It's my favorite period in Japanese history, and I'm very excited to be able to talk about it with you next week. Thank you very much.